coming up, we're going to have basically the wild card matchup. So we're going to have the Chargers versus the Texans. I think this is going to at 4:30 p.m. at CBS. I think this is going to be a very good game. I think it's going to be a lot closer than people think it will be. Just seeing the style of the Chargers this season and how they play, they are very conservative. They don't really go for the big flashy plays as much as people thought they would with Jim Harbaugh, but they really play fundamental football, if I had to say that. And that slow burn type of football that kind of bores fans but definitely wins games is kind of what you need for the playoffs, especially moving forward, because as you play this team, you don't know who's the next team you're playing against. And in the AFC right now, all the teams are like top 10 in defense, and you definitely want to go into there as healthy as possible and as focused as possible. And you're playing the Texans team that has a lot of injuries on it and haven't really been playing too well in the last couple of games, despite when they had their starters in and when they didn't have their starters in. Because the Texans literally rely on C.J. Stroud and Joe Mixon. And right now, I'm not even sure about Joe Mixon's progression moving forward to the playoffs. I have to go check back on that. But if I had to say anything, I think the Texans are going to have a hard time. C.J. Stroud is going to have to be the offensive firepower on that team, so he's got to make plays happen. And if he's a game changer like everybody thought like he was, even though it was way too soon to label him that, then now it's time for him to step up. You got to step up to the plate. You got to show it. You got to be it. So I think the winner of that game is going to be the Chargers. I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think it's going to get above 20 points. I think Justin Herbert gets a touchdown pass in that, but I think it's going to be at least 200 yards, maybe less, because I still believe in the Texans defense. I think C.J. Stroud is going to take it to the needle as close as he can. I don't want to say it's going to be a field goal type of game, but it's definitely going to be a defensive heavy game, and we're just going to have to see how that works out, because I really don't like the Texans defensive front versus the Chargers defensive front, especially with them coming into it with kind of like this little thing on their back. You know, like they really ain't been the most flashiest team in the NFL, but they've been playing really great football, and it's got them into the playoffs where they locked it in early. So right now, we'll see where they go, especially with momentum. They got momentum on their side versus the Texans, and we just got to see how that goes. I think the biggest game that's going to happen on that Saturday is going to be the rematch between the Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens. I don't know which way this goes. I'll be honest with you, because those two teams flip-flop so much. And even though Lamar won the last one, we can't forget that he lost the first one. And so it is kind of questionable on how things will go. Oh, at least, yeah, they did lose the first. Yeah, they lost to them. I believe so. Don't quote me on that. But if we had to say anything, I will say this. When I look at the Steelers, when I see how they're playing ball right now, is a lot of this on Russell Wilson towards the last couple of losses? Kind of. Is it 100% his fault? Not really. I've seen this offense not know what their identity is for a couple of games. I don't know if they want to be a pass-happy team with Russell Wilson, or if they want to pull back the reins a little bit and become a run-heavy team. There's no true identity to them this season, because once they had Justin Fields in there, they were running the ball like crazy, and Arthur Smith worked out his best plays to try to make that work. But then on top of that, you also had, when Russell Wilson got in there, they started going a little bit more play action, a little bit more throwing it deep to Pickens and all the rest of those guys and getting them active, and that worked as well too. But that's what happens when you start two quarterbacks and you have an offensive coordinator that got almost play and set up two different schemes. It makes it very confusing at the end of the season to figure out what type of team you are and what are your strengths. Now you have multiple areas where you're good at, and then you have multiple areas where you're bad at. And now you're trying to fix both of them, but you don't know which approach to take or to lean on to try to get you these wins. Because sometimes Russ works better when he's out of the pocket. So you want to set up more play actions. You want to set up more things that allow him to move around in the backfield and try to get his foot together, try to get his reads together, and try to hit his wide receivers down the field. Sometimes that don't work out, so sometimes you got to give it to Najee Harris. But sometimes he It take him out the game, and then what's the next move? You can't throw it deep all the time and just throw a fly out there to George Pickens and hoping he comes down, and then he's also giving problems to the offense lately. So I don't know. I think the Steelers are kind of falling apart. I think they lose that game to the Baltimore Ravens. I think it is high scoring. I think it will be in the high 20s. I honestly think it may come down to a last minute red zone touchdown, which will probably come from the Baltimore Ravens, and then I think the Steelers will march it down the field. I think they're going to want to go for a field goal. I think they're going to get set back on it, and it's going to be last couple seconds. It's going to be 4th and goal. Russell Wilson's going to have to make some magic. It's going to look promising, and then at the end of the day, I think one of those Steelers wide receivers drop the ball. I'm not trying to say I predict the future, but I'm just trying to say I've seen this story happen way too many times, and it just doesn't look promising for the Steelers. Then you got the Sunday lineup. You got the Denver Broncos. They're going to be playing the Buffalo Bills. I think that's a no-brainer. I think the Buffalo Bills take out the Denver Broncos. I'm not a betting man, but if I had to bet, I would say Buffalo beats the Broncos off of just what I believe what will happen narrative-wise. Not saying the scripted, but narrative-wise. What I want to happen is I want the Denver Broncos to beat the Buffalo Bills, just because when it comes to the Bills and how they've been playing this season, I'm not trying to say they squeak by a lot or anything like that, but leaning on Josh Allen that much and then coming into the playoffs and still kind of leaning on Josh Allen without no real offensive firepower in the passing game is very dangerous. Very dangerous, because you gotta go toe to toe sometimes. Once the run is taken away, Josh Allen, yes, can scramble, but you don't want him to get so beat up and he's still got more teams to play. Because think about it, he beats Denver, but he's running almost 20 something carries for 100 something yards and maybe 2 or 3 touchdowns, and he's your leading rusher, taking that much damage going on to play a team like the Steelers, or going on to play a team like Baltimore, or even Houston, or even the Chargers. I'm just like, you can't progress far in the playoffs doing that, especially if you're looking to give 100%, trying to take out the number one team, which is going to be the Chiefs. So I think they're going to try to lean more into the passing game to try to work around that Denver Broncos defense. We'll see how that works out. We'll see the emergence of some of those wide receivers we saw earlier who was doing their thing, and see how they progress. Or is this going to be another Josh Allen playing Superman and trying to do it all, and he might fall short to it. Denver, I don't really see too many kinks in their armor. The only thing is just like, they were a team that was expected to be on a rebuild. They got themselves into the playoffs. I mean, they have some weaknesses, but it's nothing that we haven't already seen, don't already know. So they're kind of like the dark horse. We don't know what they're going to do in the AFC and how they're going to perform. Bo Nix plays to his strengths, and I think Coach Payton, or Sean Payton, he definitely knows those. So he helps his quarterback get the most out of each play and each snap. And I think that's very important, because you don't need to be Patrick Mahomes in that game. You don't need to be a Josh Allen in that game. All you need to do is just be Bo Nix. Be Bo Nix. Focus on getting the ball down the field. If you have to kick 5,000 field goals, so be it. If you gotta hand the ball off every time you get to the red zone, so be it. We don't need to focus on Bo Nix being the hero, but at the same time, it does help with Bo Nix being able to play to his strengths and deliver the ball in such accuracy that he doesn't need to throw it 50 yards. He could throw it 10 yards and it goes for 50 yards. So that offense works to his strengths, and I think Sean Payton's going to get that team over the hump. But I still think Buffalo wins, because Josh Allen right now just on the tear, and I would hate for him to lose that quick. But at the same time, that passing offense for the Bills, a lot of people are hyping it up, but I'm not 100% sold on it. I just don't know where it goes. Green Bay versus the Eagles, not going to spend too much time on that. I think Eagles just take that. The only way I can see they mess up that game is literally with how how many people they put in the box to try to stop Saquon. And if you take away the Eagles running game, they still can burn you over the top. But do you have Alexander, the cornerback from the Green Bay Packers? Is he going to be present? And if he's not going to be present for it, now you got to match up with 2 wide receivers, maybe 3, depending on what's going on with the health of a couple of them, and see how things run, how things work out at the end. Beat them already before, and Saquon Barkley has shown that they can't handle him. So I think that's just an easy win. The only thing I can see that can hurt them is literally Jalen Hurts, and that's if the coach wants to put the ball in his hands and make him the savior of the playoffs, and I hope they don't do it. Washington versus Tampa Bay. This is an interesting one, only because they played already, and if I'm correct, they played I think it was the first game of the season, and I think Tampa Bay beat them, but I think they only beat them because first time quarterback, first time NFL, full-fledged, full-speed game and everything like that. And he still played them pretty close. So I think Washington's on a tear. The only thing that worries me is that defense for the Washington Commanders. They're hit or miss sometimes. Sometimes they play good, sometimes they don't. And I think it really determines if you get Lattimore, if he's going to be playing that game, because we already know how that Mike Evans and Lattimore lineup is going to be. We already know how that's going to be. So we're going to have to see how that works out and see how in the end that progresses to them being able to handle the firepower that's coming from the Buccaneers, because let's not act like Baker Mayfield ain't on fire right now. Baker Mayfield is having a Sam Donald type of season, low key, and nobody's really talking about it because he's Baker Mayfield. But he isn't doing too much of the antics as well. He's being focused, he's staying locked in, and I think it does a lot with them getting close to the Super Bowl last season. So with this season, he's having a second chance. Didn't really have a good season on top of that, but definitely played good enough to get to the playoffs. And I think the Buccaneers is definitely the Broncos of the NFC. So, because when I think about the Buccaneers, I think about the Broncos. To me, they feel like 2 dark horse teams that nobody's banking on making it far in the playoffs, and I'm pretty sure they're going to give everybody a run for their money. So, I'm going to be on upset alert. I'm going to change my pick. I'm going to give the Broncos over the Bills. I'm going to go for an upset, and I'm going to go Bucks over Washington. But that's only because I trust in the Bucks defense just as much as I trust in Denver's defense, and I think both teams are going to surprise everybody on how they play their game. And then of course we're going to have the Vikings on Monday versus the LA Chargers, LA Rams, my bad. You have too many teams in LA, and that's going to be the 8 p.m. game. Now, Vikings versus LA, Sam Donald versus Matthew Stafford. To me, is who do you trust more in that game? Not quarterback wise, but I would say defensive wise. I feel like they both have the same offensive firepower or offensive firepower capability. I feel like they can both get the ball down the field. They got enough wide receivers and enough schemes to try to work themselves out to get points on the board. The only thing is just when you look at defensive wise, the Vikings are such an up and down team because they play with so many different schemes and so many different ways that sometimes they outsmart themselves towards doing the simple things that can get their defense off the field and get their offense back with the ball in their hands. So it's going to be very questionable about what type of defensive scheme that Flores comes up with the Vikings, because are you just going to blitz Matthew Stafford and just hope that get him under pressure? But at the same time, Matthew Stafford, being the veteran that he is, has lived through that. He's worked through that. He's improved through that. So it's just like, do you really want to do that against a guy who could torch you up for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns? I don't know if you want to do that route. So do you play zone? Do you stay in man, especially with Puka Nacua and all of them? There's a lot of questions on that, and I think Flores is going to be the determining factor of who wins that game and his approach to it, because his approach that he did with the Lions obviously didn't work. So I guess the next question would be do you take that same approach to a quarterback with a similar skill set to Jared Goff, or do you kind of go at it from a different angle and try to focus more on zone and trying to keep the passing game down to a minimum? I have to see. Who would I pick to win that one? I want to say the Vikings, because I just don't think nobody can guard Justin Jefferson, but LA is sneaky. They sneaky good. I just don't think that LA gets over the hump. But at the same time, I am very, very worried about the Vikings and how they move forward. So if it's up to me, if I had to say anything, and we're just talking about like Matthew Stafford in the playoffs, I'm picking LA to win that game. And we'll just see how things move on from there. So that's my picks for this one. So